Hey guys, tonight we're setting off on a damp, cobbled journey. One where your boots squelch a little too loudly. The fog wraps itself around your shoulders like an overfamiliar cat. And a relentless mist hovers in the air like it's got nowhere better to be. You're in London. Mid-18th century. The kind of evening where the sky can't decide between drizzling and full-blown weeping. You step carefully, avoiding the slick glisten of horse dung and the splash radius of yet another bucket of slop hurled from a second-story window. One eye on the ground, the other nervously flicking toward suspicious ledges. The rain doesn't fall, it lurks. It clings. It sneaks down your collar and makes itself at home. Welcome to a city not just known for rain, but defined by it. And here's the kicker: there are no umbrellas. Or, well, not yet. Not in any socially acceptable, licensed way. You probably won't survive this. Not the rain, but the stares you'd get if you showed up with a portable roof over your head. You'd be ridiculed, chased, maybe even fined. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along Fleet Street, boots soaked, coat clinging to your arms like wet parchment. The year is somewhere around 1750, and you're surrounded by the breathing chaos of a metropolis in flux. The Georgian era clutches its lace and silk with one hand, and innovation with the other. But umbrellas? Those aren't innovation yet. They're still absurd. The city smells like coal smoke, hot tallow, and something vaguely fishy. You pass apothecaries hawking powders of dubious origin, and street preachers railing against thunder as divine retribution. All while raindrops drum a steady rhythm on your tricorn hat. The wet is constant. Not dramatic enough to justify a storm, but persistent enough to soak through your soul. Roofs leak. Cloaks are heavy with damp. And the city, as a whole, seems to squint upward with a sort of grumpy resignation, as if it's been raining since the Romans left and no one ever quite got around to fixing it. It's not that umbrellas don't exist. The idea has floated in from other corners of the globe. In China, paper parasols coated with wax keep aristocrats shaded and stylish. In ancient Persia, royalty strolls beneath delicate canopies stitched with silver thread. And in India, whole ceremonies revolve around these ornate, sun-blocking domes. But London? London doesn't do umbrellas yet. Not really. They're seen as effete, foreign, maybe even suspicious. The few daring enough to try are viewed with the same caution you might reserve for someone drinking soup directly from a shoe. So the people suffer. Because suffering, in some British circles, is a national pastime. You tough it out. You squint through drizzle. You huddle under shop awnings that drip onto your collarbone. Rain is endured, not avoided. Protection is for the weak. Or worse, the French. You hear the occasional whisper. A traveling merchant says he saw one in Paris, bright green silk, like a mushroom turned inside out. Someone else claims to have spotted a duchess with one near Bath. Scandalous. But here? On these streets? The rain still wins. You pause beneath the overhang of a butcher's stall. The smell of blood and lard hits you like a slap. But it's dry. Sort of. The butcher eyes you without warmth. You nod. He grunts. A silent agreement between the soaked. Historians still argue whether London's early resistance to the umbrella was about practicality, pride, or pure pig-headedness. There's no single decree banning them. No official umbrella exile. Just a cloud of disdain that hangs as heavy as the rain itself. And yet, the climate begs for a solution. Rain is the only reliable part of the forecast. Intermittent showers is just weather code for London exists. And the city grows, people build up, out, and awkwardly into each other's lives. Alleys narrow. Roofs overhang. The rain, like nosy neighbors and unpaid debts, finds a way in. You pass a boy trying to sell candles. His wares are mostly waxy soup now. A woman wrings out her bonnet, curses softly, and keeps walking. Even the dogs look annoyed. And then, somewhere near Charing Cross, you see it. It's fleeting. A blur of navy blue fabric. A shape that doesn't belong. A man, tall, composed, absurdly dry, strides past beneath what looks like a small boat sail perched atop a stick. You freeze. Others do too. Mouths hang open. One elderly gent actually drops his pork pie. The man continues, unbothered. The umbrella above him glistens with rain, shedding droplets like a duck. His stride says, "Yes, I do think I'm better than you." And to be fair, he might be. He's dry. The crowd's reaction is somewhere between confusion, horror, and betrayal. A child points and laughs. A fruit vendor mutters something about witchcraft. You follow him, because of course you do. You need answers. And maybe, just maybe, you need one of those things too. You duck behind a carriage, keep pace as the man crosses into a quieter street. He doesn't stop. Doesn't look back. But the umbrella, that is the main character now. Slick, elegant, infuriating. It makes you wonder. How many people saw this same vision and thought, I want one. I need one. I could change London. Change, of course, takes time. And paperwork. And angry letters. But this quiet moment, this one dry man, has already altered something in the city's soggy rhythm. Not quite a revolution. But maybe the start of one. And so, as the sky darkens and the rain continues its soft, whispery rain, you walk on. Damp but different. Curious. Hopeful. Possibly reconsidering your life choices. You keep following the man with the umbrella. Not in a creepy way, you tell yourself, though anyone watching would surely raise an eyebrow. But this isn't stalking. This is historical research in real time. Sort of. You don't know it yet, but you're witnessing something quietly monumental. He turns onto the Strand, and even in the low, gray light, you see the shimmer of oilcloth stretched taut across the canopy. A gentle hiss as rain bounces off. No flapping, no sagging. It's not cobbled together like a makeshift awning. This thing is engineered. There's intention behind it. The man carries himself like someone used to judgment. Shoulders square, pace even. His free hand is gloved, curled behind his back in that casually pompous way people in wigs like to pose in portraits. And the umbrella? It's not tilted protectively forward like a shield, it hovers above him like a crown. As you match his steps, you realize something else. No one else around you has an umbrella. Not a one. Hats, yes. Hoods, occasionally. Handkerchiefs tied under chins like soggy bonnets. But umbrellas? Zero. That makes him an oddity. A foreign object walking through a native storm. And the stairs follow him like pigeons trail breadcrumbs. A few street urchins pause their game to gape. One hurls a pebble at the umbrella, and it bounces harmlessly off the taut surface. The man doesn't flinch. Either he's brave, deaf, or used to it. Possibly all three. You try to imagine what brought him to this point. Was he a merchant? A nobleman? A rogue inventor tired of wet socks? What sort of soul dares to cover themselves with a personal roof in a city where damp is practically policy? And that's when it hits you, there's no way he made that umbrella himself. Somewhere, someone crafted it. Which means there's a maker. Possibly more than one. You duck into the next alley to dodge a particularly aggressive gutter splash and realize you're not the only one noticing. An older woman in a bonnet nudges her friend and mutters, "Bloody show off." A clerk loading crates scowls upward and says, "Not natural, that." To carry an umbrella in 1750s London isn't just about staying dry. It's a statement. But how did this statement start? Who first brought the umbrella from strange foreign streets into this rain-addled city? The story skips continents. In China, as early as 1000 BCE, umbrellas weren't just tools, they were signs of status. Made of silk or oiled paper, often in vivid colors, they served emperors, nobles, and, occasionally, well-connected concubines. Some even had layers, like inverted wedding cakes, stacked and symbolic. Shade, shelter, and swagger all in one. Meanwhile, in ancient Assyria, parasols were used to shield kings during processions, carried, of course, by servants who probably had less than enthusiastic feelings about walking in the sun without one themselves. Egypt had them too. Not for peasants, don't be silly, but for the elite. Gilded frames, palm fronds, things you wouldn't dare use on a drizzly Tuesday in Soho. Over in India, the tradition ran even deeper. The Sanskrit word chadra, meaning umbrella, appears in religious texts and royal chronicles. Hindu gods are sometimes depicted beneath elaborately crafted umbrellas, symbolic of protection from both sun and cosmic nonsense. So umbrellas weren't new. Not even remotely. But they were exotic. Mysterious. And in damp, pragmatic London, that was a problem. Here, things had to be functional. Sensible. British. When umbrellas first drifted over from the continent, likely via trade ships or returning diplomats with a taste for the dramatic, they were treated less as tools and more as eccentric accessories. Something your uncle might bring back from Rome and then never use because it looked too Italian. In France, they called them parapluie, literally, against the rain. But in London? They might as well have been called, against your dignity. The first wave of umbrellas arrived in the hands of women, mostly upper-class ones, protected by rank and fashion's temporary whims. But even then, they were used more for sun than rain. A pale complexion was considered delicate and lovely. Dampness, however, was just inconvenient. Men, meanwhile, wouldn't dare. Carrying an umbrella was often seen as effeminate, foreign, or both. The idea of strolling around with a curved stick and a frilly canopy above your powdered wig? Scandalous. Historians still argue whether the early umbrella sightings in London were fleeting fads or genuine attempts to start a trend. There are sketchy reports of a French nobleman using one in Hyde Park and getting heckled so thoroughly he abandoned it mid-walk. One thing is certain. Anyone bold enough to use one back then risked mockery at best, and a well-aimed cabbage at worst. And yet, you can feel the tension starting to shift. That man you followed? He didn't run. He didn't flinch. He walked. Dry. Something is changing. The streets feel it. The people see it, even if they don't yet understand what it means. You turn a corner and spot him again, ducking into a coffeehouse, one of those busy little hubs where poets pretend to write and pamphleteers pretend to listen. Inside, the scent of roasted beans and unwashed coats hits you like a friendly punch. You sneak in after him, doing your best to look like someone who belongs. Which you don't. But neither does he, with that umbrella dripping beside his chair like a silent protest. You find a spot near the fireplace and let the heat soak into your bones. The umbrella rests near the hearth, steaming faintly. It's strange, seeing it there, alone. Almost noble. Like a sword leaned casually against a pub wall. A young man stares at it with fascination. Another snorts and mutters, "What next? Personal chimneys?" You smirk. The world's first umbrella license isn't here yet. Not officially. Not stamped or signed or sealed in wax. But the idea? The revolution? It's already begun. In the hands of a man on the Strand. In the quiet stares of damp strangers. In the whispered insults and the reluctant admiration. And in the steam rising from that folded cloth dome by the fire. A strange, beautiful symbol. Of defiance. Of dryness. Of things to come. The umbrella sits there by the hearth like it owns the room. And in a way, it does. It's the only thing in the place that doesn't look defeated by the weather. Every coat is damp. Every wig is drooping. Even the sugar cubes look soggy. But that umbrella? Still defiant. Still composed. You sip something bitter and vaguely coffee-like, more burnt toast water than espresso, and eavesdrop on murmured conversations. At least two people are talking about him. Not by name. They don't know it. But he's already become that man with the contraption, or the one too good to be wet. The stories are starting, and like all good London gossip, they'll probably spiral out of control before they reach the next tavern. As your eyes drift toward the folds of the umbrella, warm and oddly regal in its steam, you start to wonder where this all began, really began. Not the moment on the Strand. Not even China. But the actual idea. The spark. Humans hate discomfort. Always have. And getting rained on? Prime discomfort territory. So it's no surprise that long before umbrellas became chic accessories or symbols of class, people were already jamming sticks into leaves and holding them above their heads like damp cavemen. Some of the earliest umbrella-like devices appear in ancient Mesopotamia, made from palm fronds or feathers stretched over wooden frames. Think more rustic hut than travel accessory. But still, the purpose was there: shade, shelter, status. In Egypt, pharaohs didn't hold their own umbrellas, don't be ridiculous. Servants carried massive ones above their heads in processions, more for show than anything else. A mobile sun-repellent halo, really. Hieroglyphics show these early sunshades as sprawling lotus petal contraptions, heavy on flair, light on practicality. The Chinese refined the idea. By the 4th century BCE, they were waterproofing paper parasols with wax and lacquer. These weren't just for aristocrats either. There's some evidence that market sellers and couriers used them. A practical tool wrapped in delicate artistry. The design even incorporated telescoping frames, yes, collapsible umbrellas over 2,000 years ago. Your modern pop-up brolly owes a quiet nod to a Ming Dynasty artisan. In India, umbrellas had religious significance. Buddhist texts describe royal patrons holding parasols above holy figures. It wasn't just about sun or rain, it was symbolic of reverence, protection, and divine shade. You didn't just hold an umbrella, you held a boundary between heaven and earth. Fringe detail of the day? Some of the oldest umbrellas in Japan were used in no theater, made with washi paper and bamboo. They weren't practical. They were poetic. Elegant props to show emotion, silence, or seasonal change. Imagine trying to ward off a storm with one of those delicate creations. You'd be more likely to impress the rain than escape it. But here's the fascinating thing. Despite being everywhere, umbrellas took their sweet time making the leap from ceremonial to casual. For centuries, the idea of walking around with one on your own was like trying to carry a throne on wheels. Too showy. Too bold. Too not your place. Historians still argue whether the Western world resisted umbrellas because of sheer stubbornness or because they genuinely believed getting rained on built character. Possibly both. In medieval Europe, rain was God's way of thinning the population. You'd catch a chill, then consumption, and before you knew it, you were coughing elegantly into a handkerchief and dramatically expiring. If someone had whipped out an umbrella back then, they might have been accused of sorcery, or worse, flamboyance. Things started shifting during the Renaissance. Slowly, Italian city-states flirted with parasols for their upper classes. France began importing umbrellas from the East, though largely for use by women of fashion or high courtly drama. And then, there was England. Oh, sweet, soggy England. The last to arrive at every party, but always loudly. Early English umbrellas, if you could find one, were massive, heavy, and not remotely user-friendly. Think whalebone frames, thick oilcloth, handles made from repurposed furniture legs. Carrying one was less, light stroll in the drizzle, and more, dragging a stubborn goat through a storm. And yet, people started to notice. Travelers returning from Paris or Vienna brought stories of umbrellas seen on the arms of nobles and dandies. Sketches began to circulate in newspapers and books. Some even called them portable roofs, a term equal parts practical and vaguely apocalyptic. One particularly entertaining account from 1710 describes an English traveller in Venice who saw a gondolier using a waxed linen umbrella and declared it both unmanly and oddly satisfying. Mixed reviews, then. The earliest adopters in London weren't always welcomed. The few who dared to carry umbrellas in public were met with suspicion. Rumors swirled. Were they foreign spies? Fashion lunatics? Papist sympathizers? You know, the usual. And then there's the gender issue. In Britain, the parasol was seen as a ladies' item. Gentlemen were supposed to bear the elements with grace and stoicism, ideally while penning miserable poetry about it. Carrying an umbrella was considered unmasculine, or worse, continental. But fashion has a funny way of ignoring logic. Slowly, umbrellas began to appear more often. In paintings. In illustrations. In scandalous letters. You can almost imagine some wealthy widow whispering to her friend, "I saw Lady Dunthorne use one last week." In the rain. Still, the stigma lingered. Umbrellas were oddities, useful, yes, but socially hazardous. You could be dry, but you'd be alone in your dryness. Like being the only one wearing sunscreen in 1800 Scotland. Technically smart, but deeply suspicious. Which brings you back to the man in the coffeehouse. Still sipping, still warm, and still very much the only one here with a personal dome of dryness. He's part of a strange little rebellion. Not just against the rain, but against tradition, class, and gendered nonsense. And something about that feels hopeful. You finish your burnt toast beverage and glance once more at the umbrella. It hasn't moved. But its presence is loud. Loud in a way that tells you London isn't done with this story. Not by a long shot. You leave the coffeehouse with your collar turned up and your curiosity turned all the way on. The umbrella man stays behind, and you half wish you'd asked his name. But then again, maybe that would have ruined the mystery. It's better this way. He's a symbol now, your slightly soggy Batman of early modern London. You wander deeper into the drizzle, weaving between horse-drawn carts and puddles that seem to defy gravity by being both shallow and ankle-deep. A street hawker thrusts a damp newspaper under your nose, and while the ink is already smudging into poetry, one headline catches your eye. A most curious apparatus observed upon Cheapside. You stop. That has umbrella energy. You squint through the blur, and sure enough, it's a gossip piece, written with the kind of frothy disdain only a publication secretly obsessed with new trends can muster. The article describes a peculiar gentleman equipped with an awning above his person, strolling with arrogant ease, untroubled by the clouds. It accuses him, with an impressive flourish, of betraying both his hat and his heritage. You have to laugh. Betraying one's hat? That's treason of the highest order. Still, the fact that it's in print at all tells you something. Umbrellas are no longer just foreign curios. They're here. They're being noticed. And, importantly, they're being discussed. And where there's chatter, there's change. Which brings us to one of the more delightfully controversial figures in this rain-soaked revolution, Jonas Hanway. Now, Hanway wasn't born with an umbrella in his hand, but he may as well have been. The man had a reputation: philanthropist, travel writer, charity organizer, and serial opinion haver. If there was a cause to champion or a custom to dismantle, he was your guy. He once tried to ban tipping. That kind of guy. But what he's most remembered for, ironically and gloriously, is umbrellas. In the 1750s, Jonas Hanway did something radical. He began walking around London, under cover. With an umbrella. Frequently. Publicly. Repeatedly. Now, let's be clear. Hanway did not invent the umbrella. Nor was he the first Londoner to hold one. But he was perhaps the loudest early adopter. He strutted through the rain like he'd invented dryness. He treated heckles like applause. He dared to walk where only carriages were dry and acted like it was the most natural thing in the world. And London hated it. Coach drivers, in particular, were furious. Before umbrellas caught on, hailing a hackney carriage was the only way to stay dry. If everyone had personal rain shields, what would become of the noble, overpriced cab ride? So, as legend has it, some drivers began pelting Hanway with mud and rotten fruit every time he appeared with his umbrella. Which is possibly the most British protest imaginable: less violent uprising, more aggressively aimed compost. But Hanway didn't care. He wrote essays about rain. He praised the umbrella in printed pamphlets. He described it as a charming refuge for the individual man. There's no confirmed quote where he calls it a portable heaven, but you know he thought it. Some historians argue whether Hanway truly suffered as much public ridicule as the legend suggests. Others claim the tales were exaggerated posthumously to turn him into a charming folk hero. What's clear is that he was visible, memorable, and committed. And his persistence paid off. Bit by bit, umbrellas began to appear on the arms of other Londoners. Cautiously at first, mostly among the wealthy or eccentric. But then, gradually, among the practical. The weary. The "I don't care if I look French, I'm tired of wet socks" crowd. And just like that, something that was once a curiosity became a convenience. That transition, from novelty to norm, is always strange to watch. It doesn't happen with fireworks. It happens in whispers. In repeated exposure. In the quiet moment when a man sees another man stay dry and thinks, maybe I'll try that too. The fringe detail here? Some of the earliest umbrella adopters were funeral directors. That's right. Men who literally walked through rain for a living realized the value of a little cover. Picture it. Solemn black suits, solemn black umbrellas, all marching slowly to the cemetery. Gloomy? Yes. Dry? Absolutely. The early umbrellas weren't easy to get. Imported from Italy or China, they were expensive, heavy, and high maintenance. Waxed cloths had to be retreated. Metal parts rusted. One good gust of wind and you were holding an accidental flag. But people kept using them. Modifying them. Making them more affordable. More reliable. Less absurd. Enter James Smith. No relation to every other James Smith in the kingdom, but this one made umbrellas his life's work. In 1830, long after Hanway's mud-splattered strolls, Smith opened a dedicated umbrella shop in London, James Smith & Sons. It still exists today, still sells umbrellas, still smells faintly of victory. And that's when the shift truly solidified. The umbrella went from being a borrowed novelty to a business. And where there's money to be made, systems follow. Licenses. Regulations. Standards. You might not think something as innocent as a rain shelter needs a permit, but remember, this is a city that taxed windows. London bureaucrats can't resist a good form. The earliest umbrella-related licenses weren't about personal use. They were about sale and manufacture. With growing demand came the need for import documentation, merchant approval, and, eventually, trademarks. If you wanted to sell umbrellas in certain boroughs, you needed permission. If you wanted to produce them with specific imported materials, you needed paperwork. One early licensing debate? The use of whalebone in umbrella ribs. Strong, flexible, and ethically catastrophic. By the early 1800s, whalebone was both coveted and controversial. Several lawmakers questioned whether umbrella makers were stretching the definition of marine products in trade contracts. Historians still argue whether umbrella licensing was ever enforced strictly, or if it was more about appearances, a bureaucratic umbrella for the umbrella industry, if you will. But the very fact that these conversations were happening meant something important. Umbrellas were no longer odd. They were official. And official things get tracked. Filed. Licensed. You pause beneath the overhang of a spice shop and glance up at the sky. Still gray. Still wet. But now, you know. That man you followed, the one who strode through the drizzle like he owned the sidewalk, he wasn't just dry. He was part of something. And so are you. You keep moving through the soaked streets, shoes doing that charming little squelch every few steps, puddles offering free unsolicited baths with every passing cart. But your thoughts are somewhere else, on licenses, umbrellas, and the quiet bureaucracy behind comfort. Imagine needing paperwork just to sell a contraption that stops you from getting pneumonia. Welcome to London. If something becomes useful, someone in a powdered wig will eventually decide it needs regulation. But here's where the tale takes a wonderfully bureaucratic twist. Around the late 1700s to early 1800s, as the umbrella shifted from novelty to necessity, city officials realized there was a logistical question they hadn't yet addressed: who controlled the right to sell and distribute umbrellas in public spaces? It might sound dry, pun entirely intended, but the answer lies in a licensing system that tried to turn convenience into currency. Let's take a breath. Visualize it. Narrow alleys brimming with hawkers, stalls jammed between doorways, smoke and noise curling up from hot chestnut carts. London is bursting at the seams. Selling anything here, buttons, apples, bootlaces, requires maneuvering around an invisible web of rules. Some official. Some more suggested. And into this chaotic market economy slides the umbrella. Suddenly, this new item has value. It's something people will pay extra for. They'll rent one in a storm. Buy one for a dowry. Repair one like it's a family heirloom. So naturally, street vendors, shopkeepers, and even enterprising apprentices start offering them. That's when the city intervenes. By 1810, certain boroughs had begun issuing what they called umbrella vending licenses. That's right. Not to use them. To sell them. The permit allowed a vendor to stock and display umbrellas, often limited to specific districts or street corners. And if you think modern zoning laws are picky, try selling a waxed canvas parasol 3 streets outside your permit area. You'd be fined. Or worse, mocked. These licenses were often lumped in with other street trading rights. Think umbrella sellers squeezed between sellers of ribbons, shoe polish, and those weird root vegetables that only show up at Christmas. There's a fantastic example from Westminster's 1812 registry, where an umbrella merchant named Tobias Harwood was issued a portable goods peddling license with mechanicals. That final phrase, with mechanicals, is believed by some scholars to refer specifically to the umbrella's collapsible feature. Which means, yes, the bureaucracy had already caught up to the moving parts. Historians still argue whether these licenses were issued as a proactive form of business support or just another excuse to rake in fees. Either way, Tobias paid the crown, got his papers stamped, and started selling shelter from the storm, legally. Fringe detail? Some umbrella vendors got creative. A few would offer what they called dry leases, temporary umbrella rentals for a few pence, plus a deposit. If the umbrella was returned dry and unbroken, you got your deposit back. If not, well, you'd basically bought a sad, damp umbrella. And then there's the case of Miss Cresswell, a widow in Whitechapel who reportedly loaned out umbrellas from her sweet shop's back door. No formal license, but a brisk business. Locals called her the "Sugar and Storm Lady." She eventually got fined for unlicensed vending, twice. But people loved her. Some even paid extra just to support her rebellion against the red tape. And that's the thing. Licenses might keep the gears of a city turning, but sometimes, the magic happens in the margins, where people bend the rules just enough to stay human. The design of the umbrella itself continued to evolve alongside these permits. Early versions were still heavy, canopies of oiled silk stretched across thick wooden ribs. They worked, but they weren't exactly commuter-friendly. That's where an inventor named Samuel Fox enters the scene. In 1852, Fox developed a frame using steel ribs instead of wood or whalebone. The result? Lighter, stronger, and slightly less prone to flipping inside out with every gust. Fox had originally been a wire manufacturer, and you can practically hear his epiphany. What if I just bend the stuff I already make into something useful? Cue the steel-ribbed revolution. Umbrellas became more portable, more affordable, and more standardized. And with that came a new wave of legal curiosity. If the design was new, could it be patented? If it folded differently, did it need a new category in trade paperwork? If a vendor sold both traditional and steel rib umbrellas, did their license cover both? This is where London's record keepers had a field day. Municipal archives show umbrella vendors filing updated license applications with detailed diagrams of frame varieties. Some even differentiated between gentleman's length and compact form. A particularly detailed 1855 application from a shop on Fleet Street lists 6 umbrella types by size, material, and opening mechanism, complete with charming little ink sketches of each. One version is labeled Storm Class, which honestly sounds like a superhero. And you can bet some of these sellers used licensing as a flex. Licensed by the City of London wasn't just compliance, it was branding. A mark of quality. Proof that your umbrella wouldn't collapse in an emotional thunderstorm or dissolve in the fog. You can almost hear a street vendor calling out, "Don't trust Erhat. Stay dry with a city-licensed cover." Still, not everyone was thrilled. As with most regulations, the system was imperfect. Enforcement was inconsistent. Some boroughs charged higher fees. Others looked the other way if you paid a copper on the side. The world of umbrella vending licenses became a microcosm of the larger London market, chaotic, inventive, and laced with quiet resistance. By the 1860s, as umbrellas became truly mass-produced and less exclusive, the licensing system shifted again. More vendors sold under general merchandise permits. Umbrella-specific documentation faded into a sub-clause in general trade law. But that early window, from the late 1700s through mid-1800s, was when the umbrella danced in a peculiar space between invention and institution. Where the rain wasn't the only thing falling, so were the walls between class, gender, and expectation. Because what the umbrella offered wasn't just shelter. It was a tiny, polite rebellion. A chance for someone, anyone, to say, "No, I think I'll stay dry today," and mean it. And London, for all its dampness and drama, started to listen. You step around a deep puddle just in time to avoid baptizing your entire left leg. A newspaper boy yells about political scandal. A carriage splashes past. And overhead, more umbrellas. Not many. But enough. Enough to know you're walking in their wake. You slip past a row of shop fronts where lace umbrellas hang like ghosts in a parade, their pale frames trembling slightly in the breeze. One tilts in the wind, its canopy flapping like the wing of a sleepy bird, and you imagine it whispering all the way back to its first day under London's sky. Yes, the umbrella had been embraced by the tradespeople and the merchants, tangled up in regulations and pocket licenses. But now, it was ready for its next big step, crossing class lines and pushing its way, quietly, persistently, into the fashionable elite. And fashion, as always, was a battlefield. By the 1870s, the umbrella was no longer just a tool, it was an accessory. Which meant it had to play by entirely new rules. Not just whether it could keep you dry, but whether it looked good while doing it. This is where the story gets delicate. Like lace gloves on a windy day. Upper-class women in particular began adopting the umbrella, not just as a utility but as a symbol. In some cases, it blurred with the parasol, its sunnier cousin. But slowly, the rain umbrella staked its own claim. Wealthy ladies began matching umbrellas to outfits, commissioning them with custom embroidery, even having handles carved from ivory, walnut, or, for those with no chill whatsoever, solid gold. It became the kind of thing one carried, not just used. The way one might carry oneself in society. At the same time, upper-class men were developing an entire walking style around the umbrella. One part gentleman, one part peacock. The handles were curved just so. The shafts polished. Some umbrellas even doubled as sword canes or concealed flasks. Because, of course they did. Now here's your quirky tidbit. By 1883, a department store in Mayfair was offering what it described as evening umbrellas, which had smaller, collapsible frames designed to be more discreet during social calls. The shop's pamphlet described them as ideal for moonlight mischief or sudden fog. You read that right, Victorians were buying umbrellas designed for flirting in the rain. But the umbrella's real genius in the fashion world was this: it let people appear unbothered. And that's worth pausing on. Because in a city where everyone is jostled, soaked, and weather-beaten, the one with the umbrella floats above it all. Still damp underfoot, sure. But the head, the hat, the hairstyle? Pristine. It was like a halo for people who couldn't afford to lose their composure. It whispered, "I planned for this." Historians still argue whether the elite embraced umbrellas for practical reasons first or because they simply hated being mistaken for coachmen. Some suggest that once the lower classes started carrying umbrellas en masse, the upper classes flirted with abandoning them entirely. But style always loops around. By the late 19th century, umbrellas were everywhere. Silk canopies, bamboo frames, ebony handles shaped like greyhounds, falcons, or, occasionally, snakes, because nothing says dry and dignified like gripping a wooden cobra in a thunderstorm. And this fashionable explosion fed into something bigger, the rise of umbrella houses. Not shops. Houses. Companies that didn't just sell umbrellas, they crafted them. Family-run firms that treated each piece as a legacy. One such house, Wilkinson & Son, famously offered lifetime umbrella maintenance. If your umbrella broke, even years after purchase, you could bring it back for a restorative evaluation. Imagine it. Little umbrella hospitals. Padded drawers, tiny screwdrivers, waxed thread. Umbrellas being mended like fine jewelry. You picture a bearded craftsman in a waistcoat, adjusting a crooked rib with solemn care, and you realize the umbrella had transcended its origins. It had become an object of affection, of ownership. And yet, for all its glamour, the umbrella still had to survive the brutal honesty of the street. Because fashion is fleeting, but weather is relentless. That's where you meet the bootblacks, the crossing sweepers, the newspaper boys. They weren't just background characters in the umbrella's rise. They were active participants. Many lower-class Londoners couldn't afford umbrellas outright. But they could rent one. Or borrow one. Or, in some cases, steal one. Yes, umbrella theft became such a nuisance in the 1880s that some city watchmen carried umbrella staves to recover stolen property. One enterprising chap named Rufus Wintle ran an umbrella lending station from the base of a church tower in Soho. For a small fee and a deposit, you got a numbered token and an umbrella, stamped with the Wintle seal. If you returned it intact, you got most of your deposit back. If not, well, Rufus kept the coin. And here's your fringe detail. The Wintle operation was so successful that he had over 400 umbrellas in circulation during peak rainy weeks. That's more than some modern libraries have in their entire lending programs. Eventually, shops began offering guaranteed dryness, an early form of umbrella insurance. If your newly bought umbrella broke within the first month, they'd replace it. A few cheeky customers, of course, bent them on purpose for an upgrade. Human nature, wetter but unchanged. You wander now into an open square. The rain's lightened to a mist, the kind that clings to your skin like cold breath. A man nearby closes his umbrella with a soft snap and tucks it under his arm like a saber. The air smells of coal smoke and wet paper. And all around you, umbrellas. Not just one type. Dozens. Plain black ones. Plaid ones. Lace-fringed ones. Miniatures for children and wide canopies for families. Some held high with confidence. Others tilted at odd angles, as if still learning how to be used. It's not just a tool anymore. It's a language. A signal. A Londoner's silent pact with the sky. You can reign, but you won't win. And tucked beneath all that style, those curved handles, and dainty trims, lies the bureaucracy still chugging along quietly in the background. Import tariffs. Business permits. Licensing renewals. Even fashion needs paperwork. You pass a small shop window where an old license is framed like an heirloom. Faded ink. Cursive handwriting. Approved vendor of personal rain shades 1879. It feels like a whisper from the past. Like someone long gone is reaching out to say, "We made staying dry an art form." And honestly, you're grateful they did. You keep walking, shoulders a little hunched now, not from the chill, but from the quiet awareness that you're passing through layers of time. You glance up at the umbrellas bobbing above the crowd. They're part of the scenery now, as ordinary as a lamppost or a busker's tune. But rewind just a few decades, and you'd have seen something entirely different. Umbrellas locked up like bicycles, tethered to railings and racks, with iron loops and tiny padlocks. Because in the late Victorian era, umbrella theft didn't just spike, it became an art form. As umbrellas transitioned from being exclusive luxury goods to common possessions, they also became one of the most commonly stolen items in London. Think of them like the AirPods of the 1880s. Everywhere, desirable, and tragically easy to lose track of. Thieves didn't even need to be subtle. A gentleman might leave his umbrella in a restaurant's stand while he dined, only to emerge and find it gone, replaced, perhaps, with a tattered lookalike or nothing at all. There were even polite little scams, where someone would, mistakenly, grab the wrong umbrella and vanish into the drizzle. And no surprise, umbrella shops began offering engraved nameplates, brass initials on the handle, or custom stitching in the canopy as a deterrent. But like a toddler hiding behind a sheer curtain, the protection was often more symbolic than effective. Here's your quirky tidbit. One famous London club reportedly had a rogues umbrella rack, where members who repeatedly took the wrong umbrella had theirs marked with a scarlet ribbon and placed in a special section, like a Victorian walk of shame. Some lawyers even started including umbrella clauses in insurance policies. Can you imagine reading your homeowner's coverage and finding, in tiny print, "Does not apply to rainshade misplacement under duress of weather"? Historians still argue whether the rise in theft stemmed from economic desperation, the umbrella's rising status symbol, or the simple temptation of something both desirable and momentarily unattended. It's probably a mix of all three. Because umbrellas, while common, weren't always cheap. Especially the good ones. Some were priced higher than a pair of boots. For working-class Londoners, that was a serious investment. So people got creative. Some umbrellas had hollow handles, not for flasks this time, but for concealment. Keys, coins, tiny letters. There's even a documented case of a pickpocket using a modified umbrella handle to hide stolen jewelry until he reached home. That's not just innovation. That's stealth with a splash of panache. You pass a cafe now, its awning dripping rhythmically. Inside, a rack of umbrellas leans like weary soldiers. You can't help but wonder, how many of them belong to the diners? How many were simply left behind in the hopes of a dry escape? Umbrella amnesia was real. And honestly, it still is. But during the height of umbrella theft, shops tried to fight back with slogans. My favorite, umbrella left is umbrella lost. Direct. Grim. Effective. Another warned, treat your umbrella as you would a purse, which, depending on your spending habits, could mean absolute paranoia or casual neglect. There was even a short-lived attempt to tag umbrellas with numbered tickets like coats at the theater. You'd check yours in at the door, receive a chit, and retrieve it later. But guess what happened? People lost the chits. Or swapped them on purpose. Humans being humans. And that brings us to umbrella etiquette. Yes, that was a real thing. By the early 1900s, guidebooks and etiquette columns began publishing advice on how to properly use and store an umbrella. Apparently, poking someone in the eye was frowned upon. Who knew? Rules included: never open an umbrella indoors unless absolutely necessary. When shaking off rain, do so discreetly, away from passers-by. Never rest your umbrella on a public seat, it is a wet discourtesy. Always return a borrowed umbrella, even if its owner has forgotten lending it. That last one? Optimistic. Umbrella etiquette was particularly important in enclosed spaces. In theaters, for example, umbrellas had to be stowed properly, often under seats or behind curtains. Too many patrons were tripping over soggy bundles or sitting down only to be impaled by a gentleman's storm gear. And speaking of mischief, here's a fringe case that tickled me. In 1902, a stage actor reportedly lost his balance during a bow when he slipped on a carelessly discarded umbrella backstage. The umbrella's owner? A rival actor. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the tabloids had a field day. Now, despite the occasional eye poke or revenge slip, umbrellas were undeniably embedded into the daily life of the city. It wasn't just a fad anymore, it was a fixture. Street artists sketched them. Poets wrote about them. Even children's books started featuring umbrellas as magical objects, flying, talking, or shielding secret messages from the rain. Umbrella symbolism became quietly powerful. You carried one not just to stay dry, but to show foresight, care, preparedness. If the hat said who you were, the umbrella said how you moved through the world. And of course, it didn't take long for the umbrella to get involved in politics. Suffragettes sometimes carried umbrellas not just as accessories but as subtle tools for self-defense during protests. There are accounts of police reporting obstruction by reinforced rain covers, a suspiciously bureaucratic way of saying, they blocked us with umbrellas and refused to move. Some umbrellas even had banners stitched to the underside. Small slogans like "Votes for Women" or "Rain Can't Drown a Cause." And while we're on the edge of the Edwardian era, the umbrella was having a bit of a media moment. A few cheeky advertisements even pitched umbrellas as romantic props. One read, A gentleman offers cover not only from rain, but from loneliness. Subtle. Subtle as a thunderclap. You pass another alley now, quieter than the rest. There's a single, forgotten umbrella propped against a trash bin. Broken. Handle snapped. One rib like a bent finger pointing nowhere. And yet, you pause. Because even in that sad little skeleton, you see history. A ghost of convenience. A shadow of fashion. A worn-out witness to some very British weather. The umbrella, humble though it may seem, has survived not just storms, but theft, trends, scorn, praise, and everything in between. And still, it opens. The lamplight winks softly on the cobbles as you meander toward a quieter stretch of London, where the sounds of horse-drawn carriages are a low murmur and the fog creeps in with a kind of theatrical timing. You feel the weight of the umbrella story settle a bit heavier now, not in a sad way, more like a cozy quilt woven from oddities and persistence. This rainshade, this unremarkable tool, has done more than shelter heads. It has anchored identity. And as the 20th century strolled in, top hats tipping slightly, skirts swishing purposefully, umbrellas found a new realm to conquer, the world of branding. By the 1920s, manufacturers weren't just selling umbrellas. They were selling you with an umbrella. Ad campaigns flourished. Be a modern lady, arrived dry and dignified. The dapper man carries his weather insurance. Here's your mainstream fact. In 1928, the first truly pocket-sized folding umbrella was patented in Germany by Hans Haupt, a wounded World War I veteran who needed a hands-free way to keep dry while using a cane. His creation became a blueprint for the compact umbrellas we shove in bags and promptly forget today. That tiny design, folding neatly into itself, sparked a new kind of race. How small could an umbrella get without becoming entirely useless? Which of course led to the rise of novelty umbrellas. Your quirky tidbit? In 1934, a company in Brighton sold umbrellas shaped like musical instruments. One looked like a clarinet, another, bafflingly, like a cello. The cello one was a commercial failure. No shock there, but the clarinet umbrella? That one enjoyed an entire spring of moderate success among eccentric professors and jazz-obsessed teens. And all this branding wasn't just about whimsy. It reflected a deeper cultural shift. The umbrella was no longer just a reaction to rain. It was a preemptive strike against discomfort. This was the era of cinema, after all. Glamour was currency, and umbrellas made their way onto screens faster than you could say, talkie. Think of Audrey Hepburn, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire. The umbrella became a prop of poise and mood, a thing you could twirl in joy or slam shut in heartbreak. Some scholars still debate whether umbrellas took center stage because of their expressive potential or simply because they looked good in black and white. Either way, the cultural footprint was sealed. And then came the war. World War II reshaped everything, umbrellas included. With rationing in full force, materials became scarce. Steel for ribs? Diverted to planes and tanks. Silk for canopies? Nope, parachutes needed it more. So umbrella makers got creative. Some produced paper-based umbrellas, flimsy but functional. Others used salvaged materials from bombed-out buildings. There are even records of umbrella handles made from aircraft propellers. And now for your fringe detail. In 1943, the British military experimented with camouflage umbrellas for field agents. These were designed to double as portable cover and quick disguise. Think picnic blanket meets spy accessory. Few made it past prototype, but one was reportedly used during Operation Jedburgh, though the agent called it a dreadful clunker. At home, meanwhile, civilians did what they always do: adapt. Umbrellas became menders' gold. Tailors took up repair work. Children learned how to patch canvas and tighten frames. If you were lucky, you had a neighbor who could tune your umbrella so it clicked open with just the right dramatic flair. And through all this, the umbrella endured, not just as a tool, but as a kind of quiet metaphor. You see, during wartime, it became a symbol of civility. You might be huddled in a bomb shelter, but if someone had an umbrella, they were trying to hold onto dignity, to routine, to something normal. Even Churchill had a few choice words about umbrellas. Though often associated with bowler hats and cigars, he was reportedly disdainful of umbrella use, calling it an unmanly affectation. And yet, nearly every one of his close aides carried one. Hypocrisy or practicality? Historians still argue. After the war, the umbrella staged yet another comeback, this time wrapped in post-war optimism. New materials hit the market: nylon, aluminum, fiberglass. Suddenly umbrellas were lighter, brighter, and more colorful than ever. Pastel pinks, powder blues, red and white stripes like beach chairs. Advertising leaned hard into this cheerful palette. Umbrella companies promised a sunnier outlook, even when skies disagree. One firm even hosted a competition for the most joyful umbrella, with the winning design featuring painted ducks dancing in top hats. Not surprisingly, the 1950s also saw a small but passionate umbrella collecting movement. Enthusiasts formed clubs, hosted swap meets, and published newsletters with names like the Drizzle Dispatch and Handle and Rib. One collector, Mildred Millie Harrows, claimed to own over 300 umbrellas, none of which she used. They were preserved in acid-free tissue and rotated seasonally. You picture her now, somewhere in a cozy cottage, brushing lint off a mint-condition 1912 lace top with the same reverence one might use to handle an original Beatles pressing. And while that sounds niche, okay, very niche, it speaks to something real. By mid-century, the umbrella had become one of those rare objects that could live both in your hand and in your heart. It wasn't just an object. It was memory, mood, motion. And for every person carrying one, there was a story underneath. You pass a cluster of teens now, sharing a tattered blue umbrella that clearly isn't doing its job. But they're laughing, jostling for space. One holds it too high. Another snatches it and flips it inside out with a mock shriek. The umbrella's ribs bend, the canopy flutters, but it doesn't break. And neither do they. Because that's the thing. Umbrellas don't actually stop the rain. They just make you feel like it won't win. And sometimes, that's enough. You veered gently onto a narrow street now, one of those in-between roads that looks like it hasn't decided whether it belongs to pedestrians or cars. The drizzle has lightened to a mist, and your footsteps click softly, like the gentle ticking of a forgotten clock. Above you, windows glow golden. Some are cracked open just an inch, letting the cool air mingle with the warmth inside. And you imagine, behind one of them, someone setting down an umbrella in a stand, maybe next to a pair of wellies. Another small act in the long, quiet life of the umbrella. Because now we're in the post-war bloom, the golden decades of reinvention, 1960s through 1980s. A time when umbrellas truly went from being merely practical to fully expressive. This was the era of mass personality. And your umbrella? It was about to become an extension of your soul. You've got your mainstream historical fact right here. In the 1960s, British fashion house Biba began producing designer umbrellas to match its mauve dresses and velvet suits. Think oversized leopard prints, rich purples, and curved lucite handles that looked like candy canes for the stylishly bored. Soon, other designers followed suit. Mary Quant, Pierre Cardin, even Dior. If your coat didn't match your umbrella, were you really trying? That's when umbrellas first hit the catwalk. Actual models, striding down London runways with umbrellas flared like peacock fans, spinning slowly beneath stage lights. Audiences clapped politely. One reviewer even called it sartorial meteorology. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Traditionalists called the trend frivolous, insisting umbrellas were for storms, not self-expression. Historians still argue whether this was a bold democratization of fashion or simply a clever way to charge more for something everyone already owned. Meanwhile, the public loved it. Umbrellas became gifts. Souvenirs. Statements. And then came the tourist boom. By the 1970s, London souvenir shops were stocked with umbrellas stamped with Union Jacks, Big Ben, and the face of the Queen's Guard. They were cheap, colorful, and broke within a week. But no one cared. They were memories on a stick. Your quirky tidbit? In 1978, a company in Shoreditch released an umbrella that played "Rule, Britannia" every time it opened. It was meant to be patriotic. Instead, it startled pedestrians and terrified dogs. Sales were limited, but you better believe one is sitting proudly in a collector's cabinet somewhere, probably next to a lava lamp. And then, of course, came the corporate umbrella. No, not the evil shadow organization kind. The promotional kind. By the 1980s, businesses were handing out branded umbrellas like candy, insurance companies, hotels, even funeral homes. You'd attend a conference and leave with a tote, a mug, and yes, an umbrella you'd never use. Especially if it was neon green and said, "Bill's Accounting, we keep you covered." If you think that pun was bad, imagine it printed in Comic Sans. Still, there was a kind of charm in it. People used what they had. And a free umbrella was better than no umbrella at all. Of course, the growing presence of umbrellas in marketing also sparked the rise of what scholars lovingly call umbrella fatigue. You know the feeling. Another cloudy day, another pile of damp freebies stacked behind the door like a damp army waiting to be forgotten. And yet, not all was commercialism. Some umbrella designers went full avant-garde. There was the umbrella hat, which, yes, was real. A hands-free crown of cloth and wire that perched like a sad jellyfish on your head. Originally pitched to golfers and festival-goers, it soon became a novelty gag. Even Prince Charles reportedly tried one once, though no photos survived. Even stranger, an artist in Soho created the reverse umbrella, a device that opened downward instead of up. It was meant as a statement on conformity. It was also completely useless in the rain. Still, it was displayed at 2 galleries and sparked exactly 3 think pieces in The Guardian. Meanwhile, technology tiptoed in. By the late 80s, engineers were experimenting with automatic openers. Press a button, and boom! Your umbrella sprang to life like a startled squid. For commuters, it was a game-changer. No more fumbling at the station while the sky soaked your toast. But the real twist in this era? Pop culture. Umbrellas weren't just props anymore. They were plot devices. You had Mary Poppins, of course, whose umbrella had a parrot handle and the power of flight. You had Batman's foe, the Penguin, who used umbrellas as flamethrowers, helicopters, and weapons of doom. And let's not forget Rihanna, whose 2007 hit, Umbrella, made a storm of its own, though we'll get to that in a later stroll. These pop culture moments weren't just fluff. They reinforced something important. Umbrellas are both literal and symbolic shields. You hold them between yourself and the storm, whether that storm is weather or something bigger. They give you a barrier. A choice. A little patch of dry world in a soaking wet one. And as you keep walking now, you spot an old man closing his umbrella with a practiced flick. He tucks it under his arm like a briefcase, gives a nod to no one in particular, and disappears into a bookstore doorway. You watch him go and wonder, how many storms has that umbrella seen? How many conversations did it overhear on misty platforms or in bus queues? Probably more than anyone will ever know. The umbrella, by this point in history, had become not just useful, not just expressive, but deeply personal. It wasn't just what you carried, it was how you carried yourself. Head high. Shoulders loose. One hand on the handle, fingers curled like a signature. Some people swirled theirs. Others pointed with them, as if declaring small truths in the air. And a few still used them as canes, gliding forward with a grace that umbrellas somehow amplify. You think back now, on pickpockets and velvet canopies, on smuggled gin and rouge umbrellas twirling on foggy stages, and you smile. Because the further you walk, the clearer it becomes. Umbrellas are more than weather gear. They're weather companions. They're rituals on ribs. They're a quiet resilience you can fold and tuck away until you need it most. And just ahead, the mist thickens again. Time to open yours. Your umbrella snaps open with a satisfying FWIP, that gentle pop of resistance giving way to shelter. The fabric pulls taut, and once again, you've created your own portable ceiling, a simple act, but one that still feels faintly magical. Because now, we're sliding into the digital age, the era of late 90s curiosity and early 2000s experimentation, where even the most humble objects found themselves reimagined. And yes, that includes umbrellas. As you stroll past a small laundromat glowing under tired fluorescent lights, you think about how umbrellas have always adapted, blending in or standing out, depending on what the moment required. And in this moment? It's all about reinvention. Mainstream historical fact time. In 2005, designer Sung-Woo Kim unveiled the air umbrella, a conceptual design that proposed using forced air to blow raindrops away instead of catching them. No canopy, no ribs, just a smooth baton shooting out invisible jets of dry space. Cool idea. Horribly impractical. Battery life was pitiful, the sound was like a leaf blower at full tilt, and the first prototypes weighed as much as a bowling pin. But it sparked conversation, and that counts for something. Historians still debate whether it was a glimpse into the future or just a brilliantly weird design stunt. And it wasn't alone. Throughout the 2000s, umbrella innovation kicked into high gear. Japanese engineers developed umbrellas with built-in UV sensors. If the sun was particularly vicious, the fabric darkened to offer stronger protection. In Sweden, a smart umbrella app was released that linked your brolly to your weather forecast, so your handle would buzz gently if rain was expected within the hour. High-tech, low drama. Quirky tidbit alert. In 2007, a Tokyo startup launched a limited run of umbrellas that could display scrolling LED messages across the canopy. You'd type your message on a wrist controller, and voila! Your umbrella became a luminous soapbox. People used them for everything from poetry to breakup notices. One reportedly said, "It's not me. It's your mom." Meanwhile, cities began rediscovering umbrellas as urban symbols. In Lisbon, bright umbrella canopies were strung between buildings as floating public art. The effect was whimsical, like walking through a living, breathing pop-up book. Tourists loved it. Influencers really loved it. Suddenly, umbrellas weren't just weather tools, they were photo ops. Corporations caught on quickly. Remember those clunky branded umbrellas from the 80s? In the 2000s, they got sleeker. High-end hotels offered monogrammed models with ergonomic handles. Luxury brands entered the chat, Prada, Burberry, Louis Vuitton, all stamping logos on tightly stitched nylon and pricing them like handbags. Some were beautiful. Some were ridiculous. One 2010 design by an avant-garde Parisian firm featured a fully mirrored canopy, making it nearly impossible to look at without squinting. They sold exactly 8. None to people who actually liked rain. But the point wasn't always function anymore. Umbrellas had entered that strange cultural space where practicality intersects with identity. Owning a particular umbrella said something about you. Maybe you were the minimalist with a stormproof, all-black carbon frame. Maybe you were the vintage romantic with a floral print and scalloped lace edges. Or maybe you were the forgetful one who just kept stealing someone else's from the office umbrella stand. And that's another thing. Umbrella etiquette in the digital age became murky. Umbrella theft, accidental or otherwise, was suddenly a meme. A shared cultural groan. Office workers sighed at the disappearing act of their 12 pounds wind-resistant marvel. Some added post-it notes. Not yours, Greg. Others got passive-aggressive with custom tags. If you can read this, I want my umbrella back. But nothing matched the rise of the revenge umbrella. In 2012, a blogger in Manchester documented her quest to reclaim a stolen umbrella by replacing it with one laced with glitter and a self-triggering audio chip that played Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up" when opened. It went viral. She became a legend. The glitter umbrella was never seen again. Amid the pranks and the prototypes, some designers chose to look backward instead of forward. Craft umbrella makers began to re-emerge, reviving long-lost techniques. Handmade handles. Brass tips. Canopies stitched by hand instead of machine. In the quiet corners of England, Japan, and Italy, small workshops began producing umbrellas that were not just tools, but heirlooms. Each one told a story. One rib at a time. And here's something comforting. Some of the most beloved umbrellas of this period weren't new at all. They were old. Passed down. Mended lovingly with mismatched thread. You'd see them in rainy markets and forgotten villages. Worn handles, polished smooth by years of hands. Slightly off-center canopies that still opened with the familiar shunk sound, like a memory unfolding. These umbrellas didn't buzz or flash or sync with a phone. They just worked. They sheltered. They stayed. And perhaps that's what makes umbrellas so enduring in a world that's constantly redesigning itself. They're one of the last analog comforts. Simple. Predictable. Patient. You might lose them, sure, but they never really change. And as you pass under a street lamp now, the canopy above you glows soft orange, a paper lantern against the gray. You tilt your head back and watch a single droplet slide down the outer surface, slow, deliberate, glistening. It's peaceful. Undramatic. And kind of perfect. Because this far into the future, the umbrella has become something more than a shield or a style statement. It's a companion. The thing that walks beside you when the world goes a bit sideways. The thing you offer to someone else when you realize they're more soaked than you. The thing you forget on the train, then remember 3 stops later with a groan and a weird pang of guilt. It's yours. For a while. Until it's not. Like so many small but steady things in life, the umbrella exists in the quiet spaces. It's not flashy. It's not eternal. But it's always just where you need it to be. And as the rain begins to fade now, just a whisper on the wind, you keep walking, your umbrella still overhead. Just in case. The rain fades to a mist so fine you can barely feel it, like the ghost of weather that used to be. Your umbrella becomes more of a formality than a necessity, a polite little dome trailing above your head while the world exhales after its soak. You're walking a little slower now, half from the hush in the air, half because we've arrived at something tender. Because in the last decade or so, something unusual has happened to umbrellas. In an age obsessed with digital everything, swipe, tap, ping, they've become symbols. Both ironically and unironically. In fact, they're having something of a cultural renaissance. Let's talk about that. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 2014, after a controversial political crackdown in Hong Kong, a sea of protesters filled the streets. Most carried umbrellas. Not for the rain, but to shield themselves from pepper spray and tear gas. The image, thousands of umbrellas, unfurled like a stormy meadow, went viral overnight. And that's how it started being called the umbrella movement. For days, then weeks, those umbrellas became a kind of accidental flag. They were painted with slogans, decorated with lights, even fused together into makeshift tents. Protesters huddled beneath them like turtles, quiet and resolute. Historians still argue whether the umbrella was chosen out of sheer convenience or if it morphed into something more. But one thing's clear, the symbol stuck. It became shorthand for peaceful resistance. For standing your ground in the face of pressure, water, or worse. Of course, umbrellas as political tools aren't exactly new. Back in 18th century France, some aristocrats refused to carry them because they were considered bourgeoisie. In Soviet Russia, an umbrella could be a subtle marker of Western influence. But none of those moments were quite as visible or as poetic as this one. And that's just one example of how umbrellas have seeped into our modern metaphors. Think about it. We talk about umbrella policies, umbrella groups, under the same umbrella. The object has become a linguistic catch-all for protection, unity, inclusion, even control. Sometimes, in corporate speak, that umbrella can get a little shady, pun very much intended. A massive conglomerate might refer to its brands as sub-labels under the umbrella. Sounds cozy. Until you realize it's a trillion-dollar squid wrapping its tentacles around your toothpaste, your streaming service, and your dog's Instagram account. Still, there's a strange comfort in it. Maybe because an umbrella implies shelter. Even when it's metaphorical. But back to the literal. The last 10 years have seen umbrellas become design darlings once more. Thanks to crowdfunding platforms, dozens of new models have launched, promising wind resistance, superhydrophobic coatings, and frames that can survive a Category 5 tantrum from Mother Nature. One even folds inward, trapping the wet side inside so you don't drip all over your floor. Sounds futuristic, right? Also sounds like something your grandmother would have appreciated back in 1957. Quirky tidbit. In 2017, a Japanese company unveiled an umbrella drone prototype that hovers above your head as you walk, keeping you dry with no hands at all. The catch? It's noisy, costs as much as a used car, and must be manually followed with a joystick. So, basically, you look like you're being hunted by a small UFO. Still, points for ambition. And while all this innovation swirls around the heart of the umbrella, its simple promise to keep you dry remains unchanged. Like a friend who always shows up in sensible shoes and a weather app already open. That friend might look a little different now. Maybe they've got a transparent canopy. Maybe their handle is made of reclaimed wood, or their ribs are reinforced with aerospace-grade materials. Maybe they were bought on a whim because the sky turned mean while you were buying coffee. But the feeling? It's the same. You unfurl it, and the world feels smaller, quieter, safer. It's no surprise, then, that umbrellas keep sneaking their way into modern art and storytelling. Remember that scene in Blade Runner 2049, where glowing umbrellas pierce through neon smog like jellyfish? Or that whimsical moment in the Umbrella Academy, when we realize the whole narrative hinges, literally, on a company named after a childhood memory of rain? Even music videos still dip into umbrella imagery. Not just Rihanna's now iconic, Ella, Ella, EHEHEH, but moody indie songs with dancers twirling under storm clouds, always with choreographed puddle splashes and a meaningful glance toward the sky. The umbrella has become more than just a tool, it's shorthand. A visual code. You see one, and you expect something. Tenderness, protection, maybe a sudden kiss in the rain. And perhaps most beautifully, umbrellas are becoming more personalized again. People monogram them, hand-paint them, embroider quotes into the seams. Etsy shops offer canopies with star maps, tarot illustrations, even maps of your hometown. There's an umbrella for every taste: minimalist, gothic, pastel, literary, cottagecore, cyberpunk. You name it. You might say umbrellas have become the canvas for everyday weather poetry. One London artist, for instance, collects discarded umbrellas from bus stops and tubes, then turns their fabric into collages and wall hangings. Her studio smells of damp nylon and lavender. She says each umbrella feels like a small surrender, a tiny forgotten shelter that once meant something to someone. You imagine her workshop now. A quiet place, full of half-dried stories. And maybe you wonder, how many umbrellas have you lost in your life? And how many were found by someone else and given a second chance? Because that's the strange secret about umbrellas. They don't always belong to one person. They pass hands. They trade ownership in train stations and coffee shops and coat racks. They disappear and reappear like weather itself. Sometimes you lose one and get back something better. Sometimes you carry one long enough that it begins to feel like part of you, your own little climate bubble in a stormy world. As you wander now, the street narrows again. The buildings seem closer together. Lamps flicker on overhead, casting that rich amber hue that only rainy cities can conjure. And for a moment, you pause. Your umbrella is still open. The rain's barely there. But the ritual is comforting. Familiar. You grip the handle a little tighter, and you smile. Because here, in this modern tangle of tech and meaning, protest and poetry, function and flair, the humble umbrella still does its job. It just happens to do a lot more, too. Your shoes make that satisfying squeak with each step now. Rubber on slick pavement, the sound of a city settling in after a long, rain-slicked sigh. You take a right onto a smaller street, where puddles mirror neon signs and steam curls out from somewhere under the curb. Your umbrella tilts gently, a small orbiting moon above you. We've come a long way, haven't we? From ancient parasols of peacock feathers to full-on protest gear, the umbrella has journeyed right alongside us. But as we close in on the present moment, let's drift into a quieter corner of its modern life, its odd, charming little place and everyday routine.
you.